This is every single fight to make after UFC 271, Adesanya versus Whittaker 2, and I've got all of the key fighters from that card on the screen right now. Some winners, some losers, and you may notice there is an empty box next to all of them, and that's where their next opponent's going to go, who I have hidden around the perimeter of the screen. I'll reveal those opponents one by one as the video goes on, and place them where they belong on the screen. Let's start straight away with the main event, Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker 2. A great main event, a very close fight. I gave it to Robert Whittaker, but Israel Adesanya remains the champion of the middleweight division, so he's going to move on and defend his title next against a most likely next contender, who in my opinion is Jared Cannonier. I feel like he solidified that with his performance against Derrick Brunson, won the fight by second round KO, and it was a brutal KO as well. And not only did he solidify it with his performance in the cage, he solidified it with his performance on the microphone afterwards. He called out Dana White, he got his attention, he made Dana White agree to give him the next title shot. He said he's the only one left, he's next for Israel Adesanya, and it's a fresh matchup for Israel Adesanya as well, so it's a perfect matchup to make right now. Israel Adesanya, we've seen a lot of rematches with him. We just watched a Marvin Vettori rematch, then we watched a Robert Whittaker rematch as well. It's time for a fresh matchup that we haven't seen before, and he's been talking about Jared Cannonier for a very long time, and he's wanted to take on Jared Cannonier. Remember, before Jared Cannonier fought Robert Whittaker a while ago, Israel Adesanya was saying that he wanted Cannonier to win, he wanted some fresh blood back in the division. Of course, Whittaker beat Cannonier, but now Cannonier has bounced back with 2 good wins over Kelvin Gastelum, and of course, just a couple of days ago or last night, Derrick Brunson by brutal KO in the second round. And I just feel like I can see the promo coming together already. Israel Adesanya has wanted to fight Jared Cannonier for a while. I believe Adesanya even mentioned Cannonier's performance in his own post-fight interview after he was given the win against Robert Whittaker. So the promo's all there. They've called each other out. They want to fight each other next. And Cannonier is a very marketable guy because he's had some very good wins in his career. He's got knockout power. And of course, the promo that they show, I beg of them, please show the third round against Ion Cutelaba that he had, because he walks down Ion Cutelaba like a Terminator with his hands by his waist, like an absolute savage. So I hope they use that in the promo, but I do believe that Adesanya versus Cannonier is the next fight to make in the middleweight division. So let's move on to the winner, the loser, sorry, technically, according to the decision. My bad, that's my own brain jumping the gun there. I thought Whittaker won, of course, but officially he did lose. They gave the decision to Israel Adesanya. One judge gave it 49-46. That's how it goes in the sport nowadays. That's the sport we're in now. Robert Whittaker lost the main event in the judges' eyes, and that means that he's going to have to go back to fighting middleweight contenders. It's not like Robert Whittaker's the type of guy where you can say, try out another division. He's too big for welterweight. He doesn't like the weight cut down to there. He's too small for light heavyweight as well. So he's kind of just got to go back to fighting the contenders in the middleweight division, and I think the next fight that he should have is Marvin Vettori in the middleweight division. Marvin Vettori right now, I was thinking maybe they could do Marvin Vettori versus Luke Rockhold in the meantime and give Whittaker some time off. Maybe that's what they could do. But Whittaker, I watched back the fight this morning. Outside of round 1 where he got dropped off balance by Israel Adesanya, he didn't really take any damage whatsoever off of Israel Adesanya. I mean, I was trying to find like some clean shots that Israel Adesanya landed on Whittaker, but there was barely any of them outside of the first round. So I feel like Whittaker hasn't taken too much damage. I'm sure he's marked up a bit and he's going to want a couple of weeks off just to let swelling go down on his legs and stuff like that. But I feel like Whittaker can turn right back around. I wasn't expecting that to be the case. I thought if it went to a decision, it would be somewhat of a war, and I thought both guys would take a lot of damage, or I thought maybe Adesanya could maybe get a KO over Whittaker, in which case Vettori would have to take on someone in the meantime. But seeing as Whittaker took 0 damage outside the first round whatsoever, once his leg is healed up, he can get right back in there against Marvin Vettori in the middleweight division, and I'd love to see that matchup. That's a perfect fight night main event, and if I was Whittaker, I'd stay as active as I can possibly be. You took no damage against Israel Adesanya. Turn this right back around. It's the start of February. Let's say the end of May in a fight night main event. Whittaker versus Vettori would be an amazing matchup. And not only that, if you're Robert Whittaker, it's a perfect matchup for you. I do believe that Robert Whittaker would school Marvin Vettori in similar fashion to the way that he schooled Kelvin Gastelum, because Vettori's a heavy boxer. He's got a good chin, so he leads with his face. That's what Gastelum does. They have a very similar style. Of course, they're from the same gym. They train with each other a lot. They're main training partners over at King's MMA. So I think it's a perfect matchup for Robert Whittaker, and why wouldn't you want that in your life right now? Beat Marvin Vettori, beat another contender, put pressure on Israel Adesanya for a trilogy if he still is the champion. champion at the end of everything. Or maybe Cannonier somehow gets a win over Israel Adesanya, and Whittaker can say, I'm on a 2-fight win streak. I beat Cannonier. I deserve a title shot right now. We'll see how it goes in the middleweight division, but I think Whittaker should get right back to work, take on Marvin Vettori. And of course, if you're Vettori, this is the best case scenario for you as well. You take on Whittaker. If you win that one, you're right back in position to get a title shot, because that'll be 2 fights in a row. Probably going to have to win another one after that, because I don't know how they're going to do a trilogy against Adesanya with both of these men, but at least you cancel out one of the people in the middleweight division that have lost twice to Israel Adesanya. And you need to start doing that now. You can't have Whittaker and Vettori in the top of the middleweight division, because they would just hog up too many spots, and it's hard to give them a trilogy against Israel Adesanya. So you only want one of them, and to do that, you eliminate one of them by matching them up together. Let's move on to the co-main event. Tai Tuivasa got a very good win over Derrick Lewis, the biggest win of his career, no doubt about that. A brutal KO win in the second round with a big elbow, put Derrick Lewis out cold. And if I'm Tai Tuivasa, I see people talking about title contention and stuff like that. Let's be real. Ngannou ain't fighting for 9 months. And if John Jones fights Stipe in the meantime, or if even Cyril Gane takes on Stipe in the meantime, they're more deserving of a title shot than Tai Tuivasa right now. Now, Tai Tuivasa did just beat Derrick Lewis, which is a very good win. But I feel like that got him into the top of the division. He now needs to fight one more time to make sure that he earns that title shot. And I do believe, and I'm going to have to make some predictions here on some fights in the future, I do believe it's going to be Tai Tuivasa versus Tom Aspinall in the heavyweight division, because I'm starting to side with Tom Aspinall over Alexander Volkov. They're fighting in the main event of UFC London at the end of March. So I thought, why not do Tuivasa versus the winner of that matchup? Give Tuivasa some time off. He's been very active recently. He doesn't need to get back in there within another 2 months. I believe he fought in December. Now he fought in February. So Tai Tuivasa has been extremely active. Let's get him a little bit of time off. Go see your family. You were very active last year. Have a little bit of time to recover. He took a lot of big shots off Derrick Lewis as well. So let that brain heal a little bit, because he definitely got rattled a couple of times. And if Tom Aspinall makes quick work of Alexander Volkov, you can turn both of them back around for August. Main event of a fight night. That'd be great, because they could get their own little show going on, and it could all be focused around promoting them too. Or they can be in the feature fight of a pay-per-view card, in the co-main event of a week pay-per-view card. We'll see what they do, but I think Tai Tuivasa, Tom Aspinall, a perfect matchup if Aspinall does beat Volkov, because then you can guarantee a fresh matchup against the champion Francis Ngannou between two upcoming prospects in their own right. Let's move on to the loser of the co-main event, Derrick Lewis. The Houston curse lives on for him. Got really badly KO'd. I don't think he's going to retire, because he makes a lot of money. So I don't see him retiring in any way. Like, I think he's going to use this contract to the fullest and keep fighting and make sure to get paid even more. I wouldn't even be surprised if he turns around quite quickly after this one and comes back in the middle of the year, International Fight Week, something like that. International July month fight night main event maybe. And I think if he does come back, there's an opportunity for him to take on the loser of Aspinall versus Volkov, and I do believe that's going to be Alexander Volkov. I just think this rematch has it all. You know what I mean? It's a great storyline. Volkov was destroying him the first time before Derrick Lewis eventually landed that big KO blow. They're both going to be similarly ranked as well. If Volkov loses to Tom Aspinall, I don't see him moving too far down the rankings. So I can definitely see, especially now that Curtis Blades versus Chris Daukaus has been made, and they're thinking of doing Miocic versus Gane, or Miocic versus John Jones if he moves up to the heavyweight division. I can see them doing Derrick Lewis versus Alexander Volkov, especially if Volkov's coming off a loss to Tom Aspinall. Give them both a little bit of time off. Come back in about August, something like that. Fight night main event. Would it be a fight night main event? Maybe. I don't want it to be. I think that can't carry a fight night on its own, because they're both going to be on a low stock amounts after their losses, of course. I think they both should be coming off wins to be in a fight night main event. But either way, Derrick Lewis, Alexander Volkov, great feature fight of a pay-per-view, great opener of a pay-per-view main card. Put that fight together immediately. If Aspinall versus Volkov goes the way I assume it will, which I'm now leaning towards Tom Aspinall winning by KO. Moving on to another fight that took place. Derek Brunson, of course, he fought Jared Cannonier, but Cannonier's already fighting Israel Adesanya, so it'd be a waste of time to put him on here and just put Adesanya's face. So just Derek Brunson for now. He lost a fight against Jared Cannonier in the feature fight of UFC 271. Got KO'd very badly. He said he has one more fight on his contract, so we'll see what he wants to do with that. I don't know if he's going to stick to that, because if he wins a good fight and gets right back in position to get a title elimination bout, maybe he'll consider sticking around for 2 more fights, because he said his main plan was to get the belt and leave. But now he's said that, the UFC aren't going to do him any favours. So I believe Derrick Brunson is going to have to take on the winner of, and because he's been KO'd and lost, he needs to take a little bit of time off. So give him a little bit of time, which means you're going to have to give him the winner of a matchup coming up soon in the next few weeks. And I think that matchup is the winner of Kelvin Gastelum versus Nassourdine Imavov. I'm leaning towards Kelvin Gastelum right now. I'm going to watch a few more of Nassourdine Imavov's fights, but I just think that Kelvin Gastelum can give him a lot of problems. He's unfinishable pretty much in that division. He's got great grappling defense. He pushes a good pace, and he's got big power of his own. And we saw Nassourdine Imavov struggle against a guy like Phil Hawes in the middleweight division. So I think Derrick Brunson versus the winner of Imavov versus Gastelum is probably what they're going to do with him next. Hey, you want one more fight in the middleweight division? You're doing it against someone we need to jump up the rankings. And if Gastelum does beat Imavov, it would be natural ranking progression for him to get a fight against Derrick Brunson, and the same goes for Nassourdine Imavov. And maybe then, if it's Nassourdine Imavov that outgrapples Gastelum, you can see if Imavov can outgrapple Derrick Brunson, in which case you could promote him as the new best grappler at middleweight, and that would be how they present him as a threat to Israel Adesanya. So Derrick Brunson, Kelvin Gastelum, or Nassourdine Imavov if he does beat Kelvin, but I'm leaning towards Gastelum in that fight as an underdog. So make that matchup happen. I think it's a good one in the middleweight division. Let's move on to another fight that took place. Bobby Green got a big win in his main card fight against Nasrat Haqparast. Won over the crowd completely. I mean, a lot of people have been gravitating towards Bobby Green recently in his career. I know I have. Everyone kind of roots for these veterans that are sticking around and improving. And Bobby Green had a very good performance, man, so I don't think he took too much damage. He did take some big shots, and I'm sure his hands are going to be very sore as well, but I think he needs to take about 4 or 5 months off. Renato Moicano was on the card, got a big win against Alexander Hernandez. I think that's exactly the matchup they should do. They're on similar schedules. They both took some big shots. They both had pretty clear wins for themselves where they didn't take too much damage. So 4 months from now, let's turn them back around. Prelim headliner of the International Fight Week card, something along those lines. Maybe a co-main event of a fight night card. That could also work out, in all honesty, so I wouldn't mind seeing that. Maybe they do like June fight night main event, Robert Whittaker versus Marvin Vettori main event, co-main event Bobby Green versus Renato Moicano, and everyone else just fills in along underneath. That'd be a good fight night card, and I think that's what should be next for Bobby Green and Renato Moicano. They both had good wins at the same time, so they're going to be on the same schedule, and I think Bobby Green should be ranked number 15 after this, because I think he beat Thiago Moises, and I think he should be ranked number 15 already, but I reckon he will be ranked number 15 after this win. And I think that he should fight Renato Moicano to decide who gets to stay in the rankings and earn themselves like that number 13 or 14 spot in the lightweight division. And the winner of that one can get themselves a top 10 opponent. Great matchup in my opinion. Let's make it happen. We'll see how it goes. And we'll see how Bobby Green's takedown defense and jiu-jitsu defense holds up against a guy who can take him to the ground like Renato Moicano, or possibly take him to the ground, that is. Moving on to another matchup which took place in the headliner of the prelims, which was Andrei Arlovski winning again, another $350,000 straight into his bank account. Good for him. It's a good time to be Andrei Arlovski earning his money. He beat Jared Vandeera. Very impressive win from him. I think he should be looking to take on Alexander Romanov next. Alexander Romanov was supposed to be fighting Ilir Latifi. I believe that was on a card that took place recently, a fight night card. Arlovski took basically no damage really against Vandeera. Had his legs kicked a couple of times, had his body kicked a couple of times, but in terms of like concussive damage or anything like that, I don't think he took too much. So if Andre wants to stay active, we could turn both of these guys around in a fight night in May, maybe even on the same fight night in June that Whittaker Vettori could be on and Bobby Green Renato Moicano can be on, and you could have Andrei Arlovski versus Alexander Romanov as the feature fight. That'd be a decent matchup, and I think Romanov needs a test against someone with decently good takedown defense. And I think that Romanov needs to take on a guy like Andrei Arlovski. I don't think he's earned a top 10 opponent. I don't think he's going to be jumping up the rankings anytime soon. I think he needs one solid win over a good name in a good position on a card, and that guy is Andrei Arlovski. And if he can do that, then we'll know he's legit, and we can move him on against the ranked opponents of the heavyweight division. But I think this is a perfect matchup. Romanov's recovering from an injury a couple of weeks ago. Andrei just fought someone, so he's going to need a couple of weeks off as well, maybe a month or so. Once they're both ready to go again, put them back in there against each other. Perfect matchup in the heavyweight division, in my opinion. Moving on to another matchup, which is Casey O'Neill defeated Roxanne Modafferi by split decision. The worst scorecard in the history of MMA. I'm not over-exaggerating that. The fact that someone can give either round 1 or 2 to Roxanne Modafferi. The fact someone gives round 3 to Roxanne Modafferi is suspect. And that's a bad decision. It should have been 30-27. But to give her either round 1 or 2, That was like a women's standing Holloway-Qatar round, in a way, where Casey O'Neill's just tuning her up for the entire round, and I believe quadrupling or tripling her on significant strikes at range on the feet. But even still, split decision, Casey O'Neill. I reckon she needs to take on Joanne Calderwood next. Joanne Calderwood, I believe, just recently pulled out of a fight or just lost a fight by a very close decision. So she's going to need a little bit of time off. I don't believe she's matched up against anyone at the moment. I tried to check. I couldn't find anything. So if she isn't matched up against anyone, let's do Casey O'Neill, Joanne Calderwood. They're both Scottish ethnically. So maybe there's something they could do there in a UK card. I don't see them turning this around for March or anything like that. But if they go to the UK any other time towards the end of this year, they could do Casey O'Neill versus Joanne Calderwood. Perfect matchup to make. Let's get it done. Good matchup in the flyweight division of the women's division. And it would also move Casey O'Neill up the rankings. And Joanne Calderwood can't really say no because she's on a loss. She doesn't really have too much negotiation power. So give her the next prospect coming up. And also Joanne Calderwood's pretty good on the feet. So if Casey O'Neill looks good on the feet against Joanne Calderwood, we'll know she's the real deal. We'll see how the matchup goes. O'Neill versus Calderwood. Moving on up the card, or down the card, Kyler Phillips, the bearded lady, got a big win over Marcelo Rojo by armbar in a triangle. Armbar in the third round after going for an inverted triangle to begin with. Switched it to an armbar, got the submission in the third round. Did go to a scrappy couple of rounds in the first part of that fight, so I don't think he's going to be sort of turning around too quickly or getting right back in there, because again, just from hitting someone that much, you're going to take some damage, you know, like punching someone that much, kicking someone that much. You kick the arms of Marcelo Rojo quite a bit, you know, a couple of leg kicks got checked, so I'm assuming he wants to sort of let his swelling go down on his legs and stuff like that, let his swelling on his knuckles go down, sort of recuperate himself. He's a young guy anyway, so it's not like it's a rush for him to get back in the cage, so take a couple of months off, and I think he should get right back in there against a guy known as Frankie Edgar in the Bantamweight division. Now, I know it's tough, and I know he kind of looks like one of those block things from Mario back in the day here, but I feel like you've got to sort of sacrifice Frankie Edgar to these up-and-comers and try and promote these up-and-comers with Frankie Edgar's name. I don't know who Frankie Edgar's taking on now. Of course, he's coming off that loss to Marlon Vera. I think they should turn these two back around in July or August of this year and have them take on each other. I like Frankie Edgar. I'd like to give him a better matchup, but I feel like at this point in his career, if he wants to keep going, he kind of has to do us a favor by moving other people up the rankings from below him. I don't see him looking for a guy up above him in the rankings just coming off a loss or something like that. So let's make Kyler Phillips, Frankie Edgar in the bantamweight division. I think that would be a perfect matchup, and it would be a great way to build the hype of Kyler Phillips, and also a decently winnable fight for Frankie Edgar. Listen, Kyler Phillips is very good, but like, Howley and Pava out-grappled him in the second and third round and sort of controlled him on the ground and won the fight by doing that and landing good shots on the feet as well, and Phillips started to slow down. So if there's someone who can implement a grappling-heavy, pressure-heavy game plan, Frankie Edgar could actually do that. So, although it seems like I'm signing his death sentence here, it's a decent matchup for him. If I was going to give him anyone, it's a decent matchup. Phillips does slow down, maybe doesn't have the best of cardio, maybe Edgar could work on that and drag him into the later rounds and win it that way, but I think that could be the headliner of the prelims of a pay-per-view, maybe even on the main card of a pay-per-view, who knows, or maybe the co-main event of a fight night card. We'll see how things go down the line, but those are all the matchups that I want to see next. Adesanya versus Cannonier, Whittaker versus Vettori, Tuivasa Aspinall, Lewis versus Volkov 2, Brunson, Gastelum, or the winner of Gastelum versus Imavov, Bobby Green, Renato Moicano, Andrei Arlovsky versus Alexander Romanov, O'Neal versus Calderwood, and Kyler Phillips versus Frankie Edgar. Thank you for watching the video. That's all of the fights to make after UFC 271. Click that button up there. Toodle pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.